And
Right.
what you're referencing here is something that makes us question the definition of what a higher power actually means.
Right.
And,
Right.
are these beings, are they fallible? Like,
Ooh.
are they in it for their own self-interest, or is it
Mhm.
even something higher than them that they are
There
aligned
we
with,
go.
you know?
There we go. And that is a profound point, and one that is sorely missed in the field. And that's why. Yes, if at least some of these beings are good, then that's amazing. I love it, right? And they have proven to be that. But that isn't to say that there aren't other entities that are parasitic in nature that will literally don the mask of the guide.
Mm,
And whatever that strain is, whatever that species is, it's tied to sorcery.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is why when I make a reference to Christian demonology, it's not an attack on Christianity. It's not at all. It's coming from a place of not just experience, but profoundly in-depth research that says, okay, they are whatever these are, some of the negative entities, they're actually working with practitioners, or they are practitioners in and of themselves. In I'm not talking about practitioners in this dimension either, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking
Absolutely.
about literally whatever dimension they're in.
Mm-hmm.
They're employing almost like an alien form of black magic and then affecting and infecting our species. There has to be a balance. I realize that. So, in researching the good and the bad, right, we have to take an objective stance. And I'm pursuing that more as of late.
I love that, because this last time that we met on this platform, Nathaniel,
Mhm.
we were talking about connecting with dead loved ones and our
Right.
ability to know whether or not that's actually who you're connecting with. I think what it
Mhm.
does is, and I really appreciated your differing perspective from the one that I had been coming at. I really appreciate a full spectrum of perspective, because I don't think that we can move forward in a knowledgeable and informed way without
Mhm.
that. And
Right.
what you're referencing here is something that makes us question the definition of what a higher power actually means.
Right.
And,
Right.
are these beings, are they fallible? Like, are
Ooh.
they in it for their own self-interest, or is it
Mhm.
even something higher than them that they are
There
aligned
we
with,
go.
you know?
There we go. And that is a profound point, and one that is sorely missed in the field. And that's one thing that I differ with in, Christian demonology is that, okay, why are there practitioners in that dimension? We, again, the model that I inherited suggested, not even suggested, it was like baked into our being growing up as children, at least I was as a kid, was that okay that warlocks and all of them, yeah, well, they practice magic in order to influence some of these negative entities. And then it's like,
Hmm.
well, okay, but I have photographic and I'm going to get video evidence even where it's not just them, it's not just us practicing to influence them. They have practitioners that are in the spiritual world, if you will, if we can call it spiritual, or at least on the next rung of the ladder, there are practitioners. And you asked a profound question that, okay, if some of us and some of our species are doing that to influence them, who are they influencing?
Right. Right.
Because some of the sigils that I have found in skin subdermal, from underneath the skin to the surface. They're unlike any, I mean, some of them are Egyptian, but the way they're incorporating them together within the same framework, we're not doing that.
Mm-mm.
And so what that means is that while some of our practitioners are getting trickled revelations from them in terms of, okay, I want you to do this and do that, then I will manifest. Whatever they're operating in is so transcendent that it, again, number one, we're not top life form. We're not at the head of the food chain. We're not. Something else exists that has more knowledge and possibly foreknowledge. Which, to be quite frank, would make more sense as to how they construct the archetypes.
Right. And does that make us feel better or
Ooh.
worse? You know, like that we're not at the top of this food chain, so to
Mhm.
speak. I hate calling it a food chain because, you know, some entities are
Yeah,
said to feed on humans,
right,
and
right.
that's it's something like, what are they getting out of this, really?
So, strangely enough, in worship, and I don't know what that even means. You know, I met people recently, and we talked about this prior to being on here recording. And when I sat down with them, I mean, people that have been in this for literally longer than I have been alive, I asked them, okay, they have no ties to religion, no tie, I mean, that I know of. What are they after? When everything is said and done, when all the smoke and mirrors are gone, what is it? They said it's worship.
Hmm.
One of them, and I'm not, of course, I'm not going to say his name. One of them was actually instructed by one of the beings, bow down, worship me.
Oh,
So when
gosh.
people are theorizing, well, you know, even with the negative forces, well, you know, I know they hurt me and they did A, B, and C to me, but they're doing that with my best interest in mind. We have to go back down to the root system of some of these parasitic entities, look at the behavioral patterns, and realize that we're looking for a form of disclosure that may never come. The
Hmm.
reason it will not arrive is because it's already arrived. We missed it because our model of the phenomenon was wrong. That would mean
Okay.
I got chills. I don't know why it's weird, but that would mean that our model of, if our model of phenomenon is wrong, then disclosure is wrong as well. And what does that mean, Nathaniel? What that means is we thought extraterrestrial, land on the White House lawn, maybe cook us some alien food, watch a little Frasier, and I would be up for that myself. And you know, not, you know, whatever, learn about each other. But that model's wrong. From my perspective, where the evidence suggests, at least in my mind, is that the first method of disclosure arrived at the very first building of the altars. Which not only incorporates demigods, idolatry, worship, but the literal posturing of our species to where our ancestors, their very human condition was being curated by a life form
Hmm.
that the only way it could interface with us is by leaning into and out of archetypes. I'm an angel, I'm a guide. And so my latest research has been centered around, are these archetypes from us? But what I'm suggesting here is that at least some of the negative entities, they fall in line with more of a Lord of the Rings mythology, where they are practitioners and they're not just demanding worship, but they're creating phenomenon in pockets of our world. One
Mm.
of the research papers I was reading recently was about northern Syria and how our early ancestors were building their altars within the proximity of paranormal phenomena.
Wow. Like,
Absolutely.
wow. Wow.
Here's something else that'll blow your mind. Not only were they building their altars within the proximity of the phenomenon, but they were being given technology, insights, downloads, in that some of these parasitic entities were seeding themselves. Now you're going to be thinking at least AI,
Hmm. Right.
seeding themselves into the very technology they were imparting. And so they're thinking, oh my God, these are technological advancements rather. And they were. But whatever some of these beings were had literally, this is what's called, it is the ritual of teraphim, the carving of the name of the unclean spirit into the small piece of metal and the
Mm.
implanting of that, right? It's an implant, implanting that into the body and somewhere in that metal. Now, today in modernity, we're calling it metamaterials. We have different terminology, of course. Implanting that, and with the technology came the consciousness of the life form.
Right.
And so it's fascinating to me because literally the technology was aiding that entity in its own incarnation.
Well, and it brings to question, like, what
Yeah.
is worship? Like you just said, I don't know really what that is, but,
Right. We have to
you
break it
know,
down.
like, I mean,
Right.
what we're doing right now in this day and age with
Mhm.
respect to the advancements made with
There we
AI
go.
and all of our attention and all of our energy poured into this objective, could that not fall into a category of worship?
Absolutely. Yes. And there are those within the UFO community who try to dumb it down and try to, well, let's tweak it a little bit because they don't want it to be worship. But
Right.
let me tell you, right? I'm just going to, when you drive out to an undisclosed location in the desert and you collect stones and you modify your diet in hopes that somehow you conjure a life form, we've missed it. And I think one of the ways we have missed it is the fact we have been lied to in that we believe we are conjuring them, when in reality, we're the ones being conjured. And it's within that structure we are given the illusion of control.
Yes.
And just in this show, we've demonstrated, if anything, we've demonstrated that there are in fact life forms that are outside of this world, this reality, whatever you want to call it, and they have foreknowledge. They are knowledgeable about rules we are ignorant of. And as much as I've read the Incubi literature, which is, for those who don't know, because I didn't know it either at one point, Incubus is an entity that appears to a woman in the image of a male. But even the archetypes that they're interfacing with, a lot of them come from us. And so this points to a symbiotic relationship.
Hmm.
It's going to blow your mind, where it's not just coming to, it's coming through. And the archetype itself, this is why, okay, like when people say, all right, well, it was my deceased loved one. This is what it scares me too, because it's like, okay, well, what were they wearing? And in some cases, it's what they wore the last time they were seen alive.
Hmm.
Literally, let me be more specific. Literally, like what they were wearing the last time that person saw them alive. And so is this coming from at least the face, not the proto-intelligence, but the mask it wears when it's conversing? Is that coming from our consciousness to where the phenomenon comes to us, proto-intelligence, and then through us to where it's using us
Hmm.
to construct the mask and archetype it's wearing?
Right. Like I was going to say, like they are integrating themselves into like the
Yes,
files of our memory
yes, yes.
and
Beautiful.
accessing this information so as to create this apparition in
There
the
we
way
go.
that we will best acknowledge it.
Correct, correct. And this kind of opens up another. We have to do another show because we're having a blast. I love this. It's been a while, and I always have good conversations with you.
Oh,
So,
it is always a blast with
but
you, Nathaniel. I knew it would be.
as likewise, my friend. But this opens up another can of worms, and it kind of correlates directly with what we were talking about within the context of foreknowledge, predestination. Um, because it so when it turns parasitic, it's almost like it's stepping into and out of us. And the reason I say that is because years and years ago, maybe about 7 or 8 now, I had an encounter with a shadow figure, and I got off work, went home, went to bed, and immediately, as soon as I remember laying my head on the pillow, I was gone. And it wasn't just because it was a weekend, and it wasn't just because it was a long week working in a factory. You're tired, of course, but this was a different kind of slumber. And I can remember feeling a secondary presence. And for those, just to picture real quick, a little footnote here. For those who are wondering if you have an attachment, always look for a secondary presence. Always look for a secondary presence. Usually it'll be a feeling before it's a manifestation. So, but anyways, so in this slumber, this sleep state, dream state, there's a nightmare. And the nightmare consisted of a featureless shadow figure, long black hair. Of course, it was shadow, but I could see it was dark hair. And it was straddling me, not in a weird way, right? But it was straddling me. And in the dream, I remember thinking, okay, this is not just a dream. This is not just a nightmare. This is a spiritual entity. It's attacking me. There's something really off with this. And so I'm throwing my arms back and forth in the dream. And I'm trying to get this thing off of me while I wake myself up. And you know how it is when your eyes are adjusting to the darkness. I'm trying to get my then fiance at the time. I'm trying to get her awake because I thought it was her. Like I was trying to rationalize this. Like, what's the best case scenario? Hopefully it's her. I don't know. I mean, I don't want it to be anybody else. That's weird. So anyway, so it happened at the same time. My eyes adjusted, and I'm looking at the shadow figure. Not in my nightmare, not in my dream. And that's when I figured out that it was almost projecting its image from my consciousness. So its presence was there. But when it first, and this is, I don't understand it, but somehow when I was looking at it, it was coming to and coming through. And so that's the only way is this making sense?
Was it a likeness to you? Whenever you say it was projecting itself to your consciousness, like what is it that you were perceiving specifically?
I thought it was my fiance. Had the same body shape and everything.
Okay. So when you thought, I see what you're saying. When you had the thought, this must be my fiance who's asleep next to me, it immediately had access to that information and it started embodying that likeness.
That I got chills. Yes.
Is that right?
Absolutely, my friend.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think that is a huge piece of the puzzle because this is why, this should demonstrate the importance of testing. And then people say testing the spirit. It really is. Because within that archetype, it's a projection. And I've noticed this before. People say, okay, I was abducted by Jesus. Was it the first century historical version of Jesus? Or was it according to your imagination?
Right.
And so one lady's like, okay, yes, Swedish Presbyterian, right? It's blonde hair. And it basically looked like what we would see, right, in some restaurant or a Christian bookstore. It wasn't really tied to the historical record. That's when I realized that there's a way to test some of them. Is this accurate? And there have been some cases with, like, there was one case I had where one of these guides, one of these beings, was stepping into the archetype of a cartoon character. And when it was manifesting to this, she's now an adult, but at the time it occurred, she was a little girl. And she said, I'm reading Archie comic books. I'm watching cartoons. It's manifesting to me as a cartoon. And again, right, it's present, but it's using consciousness to mask itself,
Hmm. Well,
which
it's
is
also a
crazy.
form of, would you agree that it's also a form of manipulation
Oh, of
when
course it is.
it's
Of course it is.
infiltrating your thoughts so as
Mhm.
to convince you of something that you've already decided to believe?
There we go. There we go. And let me take that. Let's go deeper. In Tibetan Buddhism, they have a concept called tulpas. That's what they're called in plurality. And essentially, the tulpa was considered to be a thought form. The research I'm doing leads me to believe that tulpas are a form of thought. In that what we're interfacing with, it's again, these are various traditions, but they're all connected. I believe they're coming from a singular intelligence, or at least a singular species. And so what I've been doing lately is kind of playing with this model that yes, we always thought the tulpa was a life form. And so what happens is the thought form becomes a life form. It materializes in our presence, but it originates in here. And so then I'm looking at these case studies, and finally I came to the conclusion. I'm like, okay, that does make sense, but we need to structure it differently in order to make it clear. Okay. It's not just the thought form, it's the entity forming the thought to which it can become. And so it's the thought form, it's forming the thought. And then when consciousness agrees and believes, license to incarnate.
Hmm. We could even go a little further with this and
Mhm.
have it not just be specific to life forms, but to
Mhm.
outcomes. I mean,
There we
with
go.
all of the different jargon that you'll encounter with like manifestation magic,
Right.
and if
Right.
you have to see it to believe it,
Mm.
like you have
Correct.
to
Correct.
visualize
Beautiful.
these, things before they're ever going to materialize in the
Mhm.
3D world, so to speak.
Absolutely. Right. And it's tied, it's connected, intimately connected to consciousness in what it really is meant to be.
Hmm.
And this is why I believe now that, yes, that entity plucked the archetype from my consciousness. And then, so, but that doesn't mean it is not an independent, it is an independent entity. And so it is not us, but sometimes it needs us to incarnate, to
Mm.
become manifest in this dimension. In that paradigm, there is this symbiotic relationship, right? Build me an altar. Why? I need to incarnate.
Hmm.
And I cannot incarnate unless there is a series of stages of obedience, right? Build this, do this. And the first time I discovered that behavioral pattern was in funerary rites in Mesopotamia, where well, this is crazy too, where people were being told that, okay, if you build me an altar after my death, I will have a better, I should say, I would have more of an ability to manifest in this dimension again. And so the size of the altar designed, I guess, the size of the altar calls them to incarnate more. So the altar was designed, and not just that, designated, I keep saying designed, designated as a portal of impartation and incarnation. Whole show. But it's fascinating to me because consciousness is more than the driver. It could be the very vehicle.
Mm. I like that.